Did you make your bed today? And did you know that there's biblical history for this regular practice? Welcome to Manna at the Tap, a podcast from Tapestry Ministries. Each episode reflects on one of the daily Bible readings from the Revised Common Lectionary. I'm Jennifer, a fellow traveler on a spiritual journey with the Tapestry community. We call the daily Bible reading our spiritual manna. It nourishes our souls, fostering spiritual growth as we share insights and interpretations that enrich our lives. We'd love to have you be notified anytime we put out a new episode, so please click that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you'd like to see more from us. Today is Tuesday, May the 13th, 2025, and the lectionary reading is from the New Testament book of Acts. As I mentioned last week, this book is a series of episodes that tell us about the lives of the key apostles in the first 40 years after Jesus' ascension. Acts was written by Dr. Luke, who also authored the Gospel of Jesus according to Luke. Our narrative today tells us about the Apostle Peter. You might remember Peter from the stories while Jesus was with his followers. Through the stories of Jesus' life and ministry, we get to interact with Peter many times. Peter was a fisher, and his life situation leads us to believe that he was one of Jesus' oldest followers. He was old enough to be married. The healing of his mother-in-law from a fever was one of Jesus' first recorded miracles. Simon Peter was invited, along with James and John, the sons of thunder, to come follow Jesus, to leave their lives as fishers of fish, and instead cast the nets wide for fishers of people who wanted to follow in Jesus' way. Shortly after that, in the book of Luke, Peter was present when Jesus healed a paralyzed man whose friends lowered him through a hole in the roof. After traveling around with Jesus for 3 years, being part of Jesus' way, Peter was present when Jesus was arrested by the religious leaders. And Peter responded to those very frightening situations by fighting and disagreeing. He cut off someone's ear, and he denied that he even knew Jesus. But then Jesus took time after the resurrection to have a conversation with Peter that replaced every fearful denial with an affirmation of love and a calling to nurture and care for the followers of Jesus. Peter becomes one of the leaders of the early church once Jesus ascends. Having made big mistakes, totally normal human, he received Jesus' forgiveness. He turned toward the community. This practice of repair laid the foundation for Peter's servant leadership. Now, when we last saw Peter in Acts on April 25th, 2025, Peter was with John, and they both had been freed from prison when an angel unlocked the door. They were brought before the council of religious leaders and instructed to stop telling people about Jesus' resurrection. But they insisted that they must obey God's instructions to them. Now, in the intervening time between that narrative and today's narrative, lots has happened in the book of Acts. And a kind of peace has settled over the many new followers of Jesus throughout Judea, Galilee, and Samaria. The lectionary reading for today is from Acts chapter 9, verses 32 to 35. It's a short little story set in the town of Lydda. Peter was traveling throughout the countryside, meeting with the people of God who followed in Jesus' way. And when he got to the group of believers who lived in Lydda, He made a new friend, some new friends. He met a person likely named after the Greek mythological hero Aeneas, whose name means praiseworthy. Aeneas, in our story, had been paralyzed and bedbound for 8 years. When Peter met Aeneas, he simply said, Jesus the Christ heals you. Get up and make your own bed. Well, Aeneas got up immediately, and all of those in the surrounding area who heard his story turned to the Lord. Peter knew personally what it was like to get up and follow Jesus the Christ. Peter knew what it was like to have someone in the family healed by Jesus. So he invited Aeneas to stand up in faith, to turn from being held still, and to step into active life in a different way. In a relatively small community, the impacts of Aeneas's paralysis would have been felt and seen broadly. Can you imagine what the challenges for Aeneas and his family had been? In the culture in Palestine 2,000 years ago, there weren't social safety nets or Medicare or long-term care homes. But there were people whose lives had been turned around by the stories of Jesus' resurrection, and their way of living included Aeneas. We can follow Jesus' way, whatever our health situations or life challenges. Now, in the liturgical season of Easter, we listen to the stories of the divine family being part of transformation, of death to what was, and new life for future directions. We can use our sacred imagination to fill in the details of what transformation would have brought to the whole area of the town of Lydda, as well as the community of Jesus followers throughout the whole region, when Aeneas was made whole again. Aeneas's name means praiseworthy, and I can't help but wonder what shifts and turns came out of the change from paralyzed to praising. Aeneas becomes a real-life example of obedience and faith. Many people's lives were turned around because of the healing of Jesus the Christ. I wonder if Aeneas responded as some other healed people did, with leaping and dancing and praising God. Perhaps he sang along with the psalmist, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before God with joyful songs." That's from Psalm 100, which the podcast talked about yesterday. Within a very short time, the good news of Aeneas' healing spread a whole day's walk to the seaside town of Joppa, where Peter would next be invited to encourage the believers there who mourned the death of their dear Tabitha. Sometimes there are many years between the time that illness, grief, persecution, challenge, sorrow enter our lives and the time that Jesus the Christ invites us to get up and make our bed. Sometimes there are many years between the moment the Spirit gives us a new vision for the future and the time when we see that vision come to fruition. Whether it was many years for Sarah and Abraham as they waited for a son, or 70 years for the Hebrew people in captivity in Babylon, or 8 years for Aeneas, or 3 days between Jesus' death and resurrection. When we are told the next steps, our response can be to turn toward God. Our prayer can be, when you tell me what to do, Jesus Christ, help me to do it. Help me to turn toward you with praise. Amen. Thanks for joining us today. God bless you all.